one thing about this month that's really special, it's our Female Leaders Month here at StartupGrind. So what that means is in every chapter that we have around the world, so we have about 400 chapters across 130 countries, everyone is striving to host an amazing female entrepreneur, female CEO, investor, or just a leader in their city to come and chat with the local startup community. So it's a tradition that has been going on for about 4 years now, and something that we are really excited and happy that you guys are all here to support. So with that said, we're really happy and excited about our speakers for tonight. These are two really incredible women who kind of embody why we dedicate May to our female leaders. So I won't talk for too much longer, but we have Sara Moskoff, who is the founder, CEO of Winnie, and I'm really excited for you guys to hear a little bit more about her journey. She was a first-time founder and a first-time mother at the first time, for the first time together, and she really embodies how to have an amazing balance in your work and life and not really compromise one over the other. And then we also have Jessica Verrilli, who is a founding partner at #Angels, and just I think 2 days ago announced that she is a general partner at Google Ventures. So we are super excited to have them. Please give them a huge round of applause.
Thank you all for joining us. I am so excited to be interviewing Sara. Sara and I met, we were just counting back, I think 8 years ago when she and I were both colleagues at Twitter. So we have a ton of working history together as colleagues. I am a personal angel investor in Winnie, so we've had that journey together. And then I think just through the industry, I've also built a nice friendship. And so there's many different aspects of the conversation we'll touch on this evening. You heard previously that Sara was both a first-time founder while also going through the journey of being a first-time mother. I'll tell you a few other things about Sara. She's a computer science undergrad from MIT. She's worked in product roles at Google, at YouTube, at Twitter, at Postmates. Recently founded a company here in Silicon Valley. And so we're going to touch on all those different ways in which Sara's entrepreneurial journey, I think, fits a lot of the standard tropes in our industry. But in other ways, I like to think that Sara fits the mold and she breaks the mold in all these awesome ways. So we're going to touch on a lot of that. Sara, as we get started, why don't we start from the point of you choosing to quit your job, start a company, and work on Winnie? For someone with a technical background who could build anything, or a resume like yours, you could work anywhere in this industry, why did you decide to turn down all those other options and set out on your own to build Winnie?
Yeah, so I started Winnie. So those who don't know, I have to plug Winnie. Winnie is an app for parents. We help parents find great family-friendly places like daycares with open spaces or parks with playgrounds, and also get answers from a local community of other parents. So if you have kids, if you know anyone who has kids, download Winnie. I'll pause. I'll let you all get out your phone.
No, but really.
All right, done plugging Winnie. So I guess it was like almost 2.5 years ago now. Well, it was a little over 2.5 years ago that I became a mom. I was working at Postmates at the time. As their director of product. I went back to work shortly after having my daughter and was excited to go back to work and sort of get back into the real world of other adult humans I could have conversations with, as much as I love my daughter. And I kind of got back to work and kind of went back in full force, and I started realizing that what I was passionate about had sort of changed, and it wasn't delivering people their burritos in 20 minutes or less, but it was making parents' lives easier, because now I was a parent and I realized it was really hard, and there were not tools and technology in the same way that there is for everything else that I do in my life. And the more I started thinking about it, the more I realized this wasn't just like a personal pain point, this was a massive opportunity. With millennials becoming parents, so I'm a millennial, I'm sort of older millennial, but I still count. 90% of new parents are millennials, like me. And we've had mobile apps pretty much most of our adult lives. So we're used to sort of things being a swipe or a tap away. And I realized that like that didn't exist in parenting. We were still doing things the old-fashioned way, reading books and calling our moms and networking offline. And so I started chatting with another woman I worked with who has 2 kids, who happens to be an engineer, designer, and like amazing product mind. And she was like, "Oh yeah, we should really build something here." And so we just quit our jobs at Postmates and started Winnie in January 2016. Like a lot of people told me that was pretty crazy because I had just had a baby. It's not like, you know, starting a company isn't seen as like the most chill thing you could do. But I actually think it is a pretty good gig being a founder and being a parent because you have a ton of flexibility to do what you want. And Anne and I, Anne is my co-founder, we're very intentional from the beginning of starting Winnie that we wanted to build a really family-friendly startup. And so, yeah, the rest is history in the making.
And as Sarah pointed out, I love different aspects of that story. One, starting with a really customer-centric view of like, this is a problem I want to solve for people that maybe you initially experienced for yourself, but knew applied to a wider group of people, which I think is something we talk a lot about in terms of founding stories. But then also things that are different about your story, which this notion that being a parent, being a mom, is actually in many ways a great match with being a founder because of the control you have over your schedule, other ways in which that job ends up being like quite flexible, even though it requires, I think, so much of your time and energy, but at the same time, you're the boss, and so you can set the culture and other things that we're going to talk about. So it's been a little over 2 years in the journey of Winnie. We talked a little bit about the founding moment. And now people may know you've grown the company, you've hit a bunch of different milestones, and we'll talk about where you're at now. But can you break down what these last 2 years have felt like in terms of like earliest stages to the wins and the tougher moments, and give us a little bit more of a textured feel of that?
Yeah, so when we first started Winnie, things were super exciting. We had just quit our jobs. You know, we were both coding, and I love writing code, even though I'm not a very good engineer. I'm a very ambitious engineer. And so things were just like really fun. And also we were really fortunate because, you know, we had worked at great tech companies and knew some people with money. We had raised a little bit of money too. So we had money in the bank, like not very much, but enough to kind of hire our first person. And we were doing what we loved. And so those first 6 months were just like super fun. Then we launched our app, and actually, like around the same time, my husband was diagnosed with cancer. He's good now. I'll just preface this, but that was like a really shitty time. You know, he had to go through chemo and was really sick, and it was also kind of a terrible time in the company because right after a launch, where there's all this launch press and we got featured on the App Store on launch day, so we had a ton of downloads. Then it's like this really long trough of despair where you don't have any new users coming in and people are just churning out of your product because it sucks. We hadn't figured out like the sort of core product market fit yet. And it turns out like that was most of the company. Most of the period of time of the company was like, you know, dying spouse, like dying product, and just like kind of grinding away. And I think, you know, one of the things that sets us apart is not that like we're better or smarter or that any one thing we did was like magical, but just we just kept at it for like an unreasonable amount of time. And like everyone told me, like all the same people who told me don't start a company when you have a baby, like those people were like, definitely quit your job, shut down your company when your husband has cancer. And we just didn't, we just kept going. And eventually things started working and we started figuring some stuff out. And so the last 9 months have been really strong for us. ton of growth, like really good retention, like everything just coming together and working, and been growing 25% month over month in terms of our user base. And all that growth is organic, so we don't pay for users, which is sort of the magic secret sauce of winning. And so I think it was really just like sticking with it and not sticking with it in like an unreasonable way of doing the exact same thing, but just keep trying different things and different combinations of things until we kind of figured out what was working, what we needed to double down on.
I in my spare time, I really like to trail run. It's like a hobby of mine, and I've been training recently for a really long ultra marathon, and I've been running with a woman who's an incredible elite ultra runner. And sometimes when you're out on the trails for a long time, your mind kind of wanders, and you're just sort of like on these random explorations and conversations. And she was describing to me how she approaches these 5-day, 150-mile ultra trail runs. And her description reminds me of what you just said about the startup journey, and that she described running a 25-mile, 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 50-mile, 25-mile, 5-day race as not being faster than anyone else, but just not breaking down. And over the course of this entire race, I've like won these global competitions, and I was like, that is the story of a founder. Like that is a sort of entrepreneurial, like sort of sentiment of just like continuing through those ups and downs.
So I could be an ultra marathoner.
Pretty much.
I'm not sure I'm built for that.
You have good, like Sarah. You also have done. Was it an Ironman or was it a marathon?
It was a half Ironman, and
still
it was a struggle.
So one of the things I want to ask you about. So this journey, the last 2 years, you described some periods, sort of the trough of despair.
Yeah.
How many folks in the room have started a company? Okay, many. So hopefully, like that experience, like sounds a little familiar. Though, like those tougher moments, where do you turn when you need like to sort of refill your energy around stuff, or just be reminded that early conviction that like the reason you started the company in those tougher moments, like practically speaking, where do you go to get back in touch with that?
Yeah, so early on in the history of Winnie, we use Slack. I'm sure everyone else has heard of it or uses it. My co-founder created a Slack channel called Warm Fuzzies. And I was actually really mad at her when she created it. And I was like, this is stupid. Like, we need to measure ourselves on our metrics and not like what people are saying and sharing anecdotes. Like that could make us think we're doing better than we are. But she was like, no, like it's important, like it motivates us, it motivates the team. Like you don't have to participate in this channel if you don't want to. And that was like the smartest thing that I feel like we've done as a company was creating that channel. So we use that to share customer feedback. So when users, get an answer to what car seat they should buy for their newborn to fit in this car, and then they write like, oh my God, thank you, Winnie, I couldn't find this information anywhere. We share a screenshot of that in our Warm Fuzzies channel, or when someone writes a great App Store review, or if they just, direct message us on Twitter to tell us they love our product. And so that stuff really helps because when all your metrics are not doing so hot, you remember like the reason why you're doing it and how you're actually making a difference in some people's lives, and that's the magic you have to make happen for all your users. That was really helpful. I think like also having such a difficult thing happen in my life very early on in starting the company, and then my husband got better and he recovered and life went on. Like it really helped put things in perspective for me. That like if you have your health and you have your family, nothing else really matters. And the sort of ups and downs of starting a company, I was just able to put a lot more in perspective than I think I would have been had that experience not happened to me. And so things don't really faze me. If we launch a feature and it doesn't go so well, like that's fine, we'll try something else. I think that stuff would have sort of been more, I would have taken more personally or been more upset by had I not had such like a perspective-changing thing happen to me.
And you mentioned that the growth recently with Winnie has really picked up. Did you say 25% a month? Or?
That's what we're averaging.
Yeah, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah.
You and your co-founder, Anne, put up a post about the path to get your first 100,000 users. Can you share some of those tips or lessons learned along those very early phases when you're iterating on the core product and experimenting? What did you learn early on about growth?
Yeah, I mean, for us, like the most important thing was to learn how to develop like an organic growth engine. And so at Winnie, we grow through our content, our user-generated content, through search, through people sharing stuff they find on Winnie, through word-of-mouth traffic, about the data and information we have. One of the things we sort of realized early on was like there was this chicken and egg problem of like we wanted to have all the best data for parents of where to find a daycare, what to do this weekend with their kids. But we had this problem where we didn't have parents using us yet to supply that information. And so in the beginning, we had to get a lot of that information ourselves. And I think there was, there's sort of this, like in any kind of like two-sided marketplace where you have supply and demand, you can give yourself a huge boost if you kind of fake one side of the marketplace. And so we faked supply. We just got data and built systems to get data on literally everything parents cared about and sucked in data for all regions everywhere, and hired contractors who researched places and built a lot of tooling and automated systems that could get these data points at scale. And so when parents would open the app, like it didn't look empty, even in a region where we had 0 users. And I think that was like a core insight for us that, it's in that case, like what we did was very specific to our product, but if there's a way to sort of jumpstart or kickstart one end of your, supply demand economy, that's a really helpful thing to do to spur growth.
And were there any, as you like heard growth hacking tips from other folks, was there anything you came across that like, I don't know, any common notions there that you want to dispel, or things like we tried this and we thought that would work, but it just like really wasn't the right strategy for us, or other things that you encourage people to just like double down on early in the phases of building a product?
Yeah, I think growth hacking kind of gets a bad reputation. We kind of like growth hacking. We consider ourselves like good growth hackers. But I think there are a lot of sort of table stakes things that are now sort of known and out there. For example, we started sending our users a weekly digest email. Now we actually send it twice a week. And it's just a personalized view of like what you would have missed, the best stuff you would have seen if you had opened the Winnie app. And so it includes, local places that would be interesting to you and conversations that are relevant to your kid's age. And we were like, oh, people hate email. That's such a growth hacky thing to do. Like, we should not send email. We should wait till we have like really, really great emails that people love. But it turns out like people really do like our email. It has a really high open rate and click-through rate, and it was working out so well for us that we started sending it twice a week, different content in each one, and we don't see our unsubscribes really increase. And so I think we were sort of worried of like just using basic techniques like sending emails, sending push notifications. Those things are really important to do. They're table stakes. They bring people back to your product, especially in like 2018 where there's a million apps and a million services people download. Parents are also the busiest of people. And so if you don't keep getting to them where they are, they could actually have liked your product, but just be busy and forgotten about you.
And in our industry, there's a lot of forums like this and elsewhere on the internet to offer advice for founders on that like journey of building a company. What about this journey has lined up with your expectations? Or you're like, I thought it was going to be like this, and it totally was. And what, if anything, of those expectations did turn out to be false in your experience?
Yeah, so I think, people told me it'd be hard, and like, yeah, it's hard.
Not the most chill thing to do.
It isn't the most chill thing to do. But people also said, like, you will have to work 24/7. And that, we've been really, really strict about not doing that, and we've been pretty good about it. And we have this forcing function, which is we like have these kids to take care of. And so like, even if I wanted to work 24/7, like I can't, because then my like 3-year-old would just be running around unsupervised, and not going to bed. And so that wasn't true. Like we could build a family-friendly startup. And we also don't feel like those extra hours of like 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. or 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. where we could have been grinding away in the office, but we're actually at home having dinner with our family, and putting our kids to bed, are like make or breaking our success. In fact, I think it's helping our success because it's helped us hire people that could be hired anywhere but are choosing to work for Winnie because we have a better environment for them, more flexible environment. And it's helped us like focus. Like we have very limited number of hours in the day, and so we're constantly like getting in and asking ourselves like, do we have to do this thing? Like, should we just delete this feature if it's taking up our time? If something is requiring me to like work on the weekend to maintain it, like that's on the chopping block for getting cut. So we're just like ruthlessly prioritizing. So I think this like mythology around like you have to work 24/7 actually hinders founders. And like if you can be disciplined about you don't work those hours, you can actually create a company where you can hire people that you might otherwise not be able to afford, and you will prioritize the most important things.
I've also heard you describe, I think in a like Twitter debate about this topic, despite not like working around the clock and absolutely sacrificing everything else in your life, you still maintain as a founder this like complete obsession about the problem you're trying to solve, because it just is a part of your everyday experience. And how as a founder you also still though like throughout your day-to-day are tapped into this central thing that you're so passionate about.
Yeah, like it's nice that we are building an app to help parents, because even when we're not working, we're kind of working because we're thinking about our own kids and our day-to-day lives and what could help us and what can make this easier for us. I think one of our most popular features on Winnie is our daycare and preschool search, and it's like literally because I need to find preschool for my child. And so like we try not to just build for ourselves, but a lot of times like the initial spark or insight that like this could be a big problem, let's go investigate it, comes from our own experience. We also have a lot of data on restaurants that are family friendly. That kind of came from my experience early on. That is not as much of a pain point for parents across the country as it is for like me as a San Francisco foodie wanting to take my daughter to nice restaurants. So it is important that you don't just build for yourself and your needs, because that was I think we went really deep on restaurant data in a way that maybe wasn't applicable to everyone. So it swings both ways.
What are your favorite restaurants in San Francisco?
Yeah, so like I've taken my daughter to like House of Prime Rib.
I've seen this on Twitter.
But now she's like almost 3 and she'll eat like I eat. Like
I feel like I saw a photo of her at State Bird.
She's been a couple times to State Bird. But she eats now. Like it was really great when I could just like give her a little bit of my portion. Now she orders an adult portion, so it's like it's cheaper for you to just keep her home with a babysitter than bring her out to an expensive restaurant.
And just you touched on some of these lessons about building a product where you want to understand that customer use case, but not also you want to identify with it, but also not over rotate to just solve for a San Franciscan experience for some of your particular preferences. Did some of those lessons, if we look back at sort of your career experience at Google and at YouTube and Twitter, can you draw upon sort of what you took looking back at those experiences that now sort of informs your perspective on how you build product or how you build a company?
Yeah, I think there's things I've learned in all of the places I've worked. At Postmates, I learned all about like, kind of faking the sort of supply side of the marketplace and growing demand. So like Postmates in the beginning got started because it delivered from any restaurant you wanted or any place you wanted, even if they didn't have a relationship with that place, and that's what made the product so popular. So I kind of learned to do the same thing with Winnie.
Bootstrapping
like,
supply.
We're gonna just have information on anywhere, even if we don't have any relationship. At Twitter, like Twitter is a massive crowdsourced product, and so obviously learned a lot there about like how to build an engaging product for users that's also powered by users. At Google and YouTube, I was on like the product arm of the partnerships team, and so I learned how to interface with other companies. But actually, like looking back at everything I did at all those companies, like the thing that comes in the most handy now was not like any one particular product feature I worked on or thing I learned to do, but it was actually the relationships I built. All the people I've worked with have like gone on, like Jess, to do like bigger and better things and be extremely famous and influential in the industry. And so those relationships have been the most helpful to me in starting Winnie, way beyond any like code I learned to write or product I learned to launch. Those relationships are what got me initial funding for my company. It's what helped get it off the ground and helped me hire engineers. And I think I really undervalued those relationships when I was working in those jobs. I was very focused on like just being the best worker possible, even at the expense of other people when it was necessary. And that's, fortunately I didn't burn too many bridges and seem to have made a decent impression on some people, but I can only I kick myself thinking, what if I had spent more of my time like building relationships with awesome people in the industry that I didn't focus on.
One of the things I've learned, looking back on my experience at like a hyper-growth company like Twitter, much like you, has been the things I personally treasure the most and have found to be most valuable, but then also truly professionally what has turned out to be really unique and valuable, like you, are those relationships. But I have found there's so much discussion in the industry about networking and relationship development, but truthfully, I think the only way to do that is substantive and that is real, so that when you're next doing your startup or at a career transition, or you want to reference and you want to make that phone call and have people show up for you in a meaningful way, is actually to do the crazy hard work of being in some way like in the trenches with people. And that can be at a startup that's like knocking it out of the park and on that hyper growth trajectory. It could be at a startup that does not work out. It could be within a bigger company if you're on a team that you're like kind of lock arms with folks around the table and you're like, we're going to do something ambitious and it's going to be hard and we're going to do it together. Because I think that real like textured relationship comes not so much from the easy wins and the headlines, but the tougher moments when you need some real trust to work through the I took it in this direction. I think we're headed on the wrong course, and we gotta I think I need to chart a different path. What do you think? And you turn to someone in a sort of vulnerable moment to be like, we're gonna try to figure this out together. And so, as I look back, occasionally reflecting on my Twitter experience or talking to folks going through those experiences, in hindsight, I actually think those harder moments, the less glamorous stuff, the stuff that doesn't make the headlines, is when all the real substance is built, because that's the foundation for people that later in your career, you want to work with or will show up for you or do all the amazing things that sort of I think you were touching on. You were mentioning hiring and sort of how you've built the early team. I'm sure for everyone in this room who's founded a company and is in those early phases or maybe later phases of doing it, hiring in my experience, is always top of mind for founders and always number one question where folks want help. How are you finding hiring in the Bay Area right now? Just with cost of living and this very rich ecosystem around, what have you learned to hire effectively, and how are you navigating some of the practical challenges?
Yeah, so I think this was something that people said would be extremely hard / impossible if we were paying people below market, which we were in the beginning. And we actually did not find it hard. I think one of the things is like being two female founders, like we just, women wanted to work for us. They wanted an environment that would support and promote women. So that, you know, we had the opposite problem of like, oh, we need a white dude. Like, we're underrepresented in white guys. Yeah, that was awesome. And I think the other thing was setting up this family-friendly environment was a real differentiator for us. And like it attracted not only people with families, but also just people who wanted flexibility to not be in the office 24/7, but still work for a startup. Like there's a lot of benefits you get working for a startup. You get to, you know, a lot of times have a larger role than you would get in a, you know, established company. You get to move really quickly. You get to have a ton of ownership. But it comes with this trade-off of like, you're just grinding all the time and you have so much responsibility and it's so intense. So we were like, what if you don't have to make that trade-off? What if you can just have this awesome, fast-paced startup job, but you can go home every day at 6 p.m. And have dinner with your family, or you know, go to the gym or whatever it is you like to do. And we're also not going to call you on the weekend, and we're not going to make you be on call. And it turns out that was a huge selling point for people. Also, like, there's this nice constraint when you're a startup that you can't hire that many people. And so we're right now a team of 7. So like when you just don't have that many roles to fill, you can fill them and then be done with it.
We talk a little bit, probably the most important relationship in terms of folks you hire, folks that you work with every day is probably that with your co-founder.
Yeah.
How did you find your co-founder? We have a mutual friend who's in the process of starting a company, and on that journey of finding a co-founder and trying to spend a lot of time to get that right because it's so important. How did you find your co-founder, and how did you know like this, we can do this together, like we are going to complement one another, or we, in what ways you have different skill sets, in what ways you're like, we need to really be centrally aligned on the same page on certain things? And what have you learned along that journey with your co-founder?
Yeah, so like I'd say 50% of the reason I started Winnie was like I saw this need for parents and this opportunity, and like I wanted to work on something I was passionate about. The other 50% is like I kind of, without even realizing it, had pitched this idea to Anne, and she wanted to quit her job and start a company with me. And Anne, you know, is an engineer. She writes code. She's a designer, so she does all the mocks, and she is a lot better of a product thinker than me. And so when she like wanted to start a company with me, I was like, oh shit, like I would have worked on pretty much anything just for the opportunity to work with Anne. And so like, I actually didn't know her for very long. Like we had worked together. I think we had overlapped for like 6 months at Postmates, but I was out on maternity leave for some of that time. But I saw that she was extremely talented and like we seemed to get along. So I just took a leap of faith, and it's been amazing. Like she is the perfect, like, you know, you want that like co-founder who can do everything. Like she's that. And then, you know, she also, you know, really stepped up to the plate when I, you know, had to take care of my husband and I wasn't as available. She didn't ask for a second, like, you know, what should she do? Or she just took over and kept things running smoothly. In fact, it was like more smooth than when I was in the office, which made me question like my value. But I think anytime a co-founder makes you question if like you're even valuable, you should be the CEO. She never has asked that to me. I internally question that all the time because I'm like, am I really even doing anything here? That's a good co-founder. So like, if you can find someone who just like makes you question your worth, that I felt like that was a good indication.
And I also find, I don't know, as I look back on my career, there were certain people I worked with or intersected with that was always, it was always easy. Like, it was always easy to have a conversation with because you instantly shared some similar excitement about things, or you found yourself always naturally wanting to like recommend them for things, or try to find opportunities to them because they were just excellent. They're just the people you want to work with. So I think about that in my own journey too, of people that whether it's founding a company or you're like, I want to back whatever they do next, or I want it. And like I mentioned that I was fortunate to be an angel investor in Sarah's company, and through Twitter, I think we were fortunate too to work with such a large number of incredibly talented people, many of whom have gone on to do found companies with other colleagues or start their next chapters. And we were, I think, lucky to know a lot of people through that network. And then you and Anne met at Postmates. We'll probably ask one more question and then give folks a chance to ask questions in the audience if people have any. Let's talk a little bit about fundraising and what that journey is like. Any just practical tips, because I think that will be a part of the journey and probably has been for many of the people in the room. What have you learned about that process, and what would you pass along?
Yeah, so I've done quite a bit of fundraising now. And the biggest thing, it is not my favorite activity. It is my least favorite activity. Probably right up there with like going into labor and birthing a child. In fact, I'd rather do that than fundraising. Fundraising. So the number one thing, and like I wish I knew this in the beginning, but we kind of figured it out pretty quickly, is like it is a sales funnel. And you are gonna get like, just assume that 90% of the people you talk to are gonna reject you. If you can do better than that, like awesome, like maybe you're a white guy, like maybe you have some awesome pedigree, maybe you know really rich people, but if you're, 9 months pregnant and look like me and are building something that isn't crypto, like you might have a harder time. And so like the thing to keep in mind is like it is at the end of the day a numbers game. And so just realizing that you may have to reach out to 100 people for one yes at the very end of that funnel, and just being okay moving through that list pretty quickly. And as you get rejections, they can be incredibly demoralizing. But like the faster you just build that muscle of like rejection not being something that really gets to you, the more rejections you're going to be able to take, which means you're more likely to get to that one yes. And in the beginning, like I had not built that rejection muscle at all. Like I was used to being the best and getting promoted and, going to a great college and getting good grades. And, I think rejection has always been really hard for me. And I've always avoided situations where I thought there was a possibility to get rejected, like going for a job that I probably couldn't get. And I think like the thing you learn as a founder really quickly, and especially in fundraising, is like you are only going to get to that opportunity if you go through a bunch of rejections. And so like the more you can get practice at it, the better. And like fundraising is a great opportunity to get practice at it. Also just like day-to-day stuff with your company, like ask for a service for free. You'll get rejected a bunch of the time, but you might get your like AWS free credits extended a year, which we did, which is awesome. And so like you never know if you don't ask. And the less afraid of rejection you are, like the more people you're going to be able to ask. And I think at the end of the day, it's a numbers game. And like you really only need one lead investor, one yes, for everyone else to come around the table. Which is like the craziest thing about fundraising. Every VC will tell you they're such an independent thinker, but they're not. They all just follow each other. So you really just need to convince one sucker that your thing is a good idea. And then they all flock to you and are like, wait, like I wanted to be in this round. Like you didn't save me enough space. Like I was a believer from the beginning. And it's great. And so, like, just know that is at the end of the tunnel if you just talk to enough people.
And maybe to wrap up, 2 questions for you. One, who do you admire in the industry, founders or other folks that sort of are people that inspired you? And what is the best thing about founding and building Winnie?
Yeah, boy, people I admire. I mean, I really admire my co-founder. I think I've spoke her praises a lot, but she's really like the person at the end of the day that has kept me going. Like, she's the definition of an optimist, and so like, as we would get rejections, you know, she would be like, no, but this this next one is like going to be different. And I feel like she really believed it, and she'd convinced me. So I feel like that sort of outlook on life and on the founding journey is like really important. So try to, you know, I'm kind of a realist / like pessimist worrier. And so like if you can find a co-founder that's different in that way, it's really helpful. What was the other part of your question? What has been
the best thing about founding and building Winnie?
Oh yeah, I really like being a boss. It's great. I didn't think it would matter to me so much, but once you get a taste of being in charge, it's really hard to go back. Especially like being able to create the culture at my company that I want to work at, especially as a mom, especially as someone about to have another child, like that sort of flexibility and that like permission to, you know, work from home after I have my baby for however long I want. Like, I don't have to explain that to anyone. I don't have to negotiate that. And I think that is amazing. And like, I wish more parents understood how awesome starting a company is, especially like parents of young children, because it really could be like the most flexible job for them.
That is the perfect, I think, note to wrap up our segment of all the ways you fit the mold and break the mold. Sir, thank you. We'll also open it up if other folks want to jump in and ask us questions.
I think we'll start without a microphone. If we need one, I can
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for doing this for us. But do you have any advice for a founder who's also a parent, first-time founder, bootstrapped, and also has a demanding wife?
A demanding life or demanding wife?
Wife with a demanding life, because it all
I think your spouse is actually really important. And I had this like vision early on in starting Winnie that like I was gonna have this crazy demanding company, and my husband was doing really well in his career. I think him getting sick sort of put it back into perspective for us. And I think there are, you know, if you're fortunate enough to be in a partnership with someone, there are ways to kind of structure that partnership where both people are in grinding, you know, traveling to foreign countries, kind of working all the time at the same time. And I think that's like an asset. Like, not everyone is in a partnership, and that, you know, you have other assets. You don't have to, you know, worry about being home for dinner for another person. But if you are lucky enough, and I feel really lucky to be married to who I'm married to be with someone who supports you, like having a real conversation with them of like, you know, this phase of my career really matters to me. Do you want to be doing what you're doing in the same way? And like, for like right now, my husband is taking some time off work, and he's at home with my daughter, and like that, having him and his support, I think enables me to do what I do. Like I honestly think like I wouldn't be here if he wasn't so supportive. My co-founder also happens to have a husband right now who's staying at home with their kids. And so I think like the more you can have that conversation and kind of work out, like it's also, we have this great benefit of living in the Bay Area where you don't have to be 100% of the time always at the top of your game, like trying to get to the next level. You can take some breaks and come back into it and then grind away, or you can, take 2 years off is like standard here, and travel the world. So like, I think taking advantage of that and having a real conversation of like, do we both need to be doing this at the same time, or can one of us kind of step back for a minute and, take a break and be more supportive of the other person? Because I think it is really hard to have both parents be really intense with a young child. Not impossible though. We did it for a few years. Someone did get cancer, but we're alive.
Yeah, really challenging too, because some of that flexibility requires quite a bit of privilege in terms of financial freedom and whatnot. But I also admire a lot of Sara's journey has had a lot of different texture and different challenges that have been navigated through a great partnership with both your spouse and the co-founder. And I think it speaks to a lot of those relationships and how you navigate each of those to create systems that are robust enough to sort of like survive some of those ups and downs and thrive.
Yeah, it's also a reason to raise money and not, if you can, like bootstrapping is great, but also raising some funds. Like, it doesn't mean you have to take $100 million, but raising some funds so that you can take a salary. I'm a big proponent of founders taking salaries, taking like a living salary, a Bay Area living salary if you live in the Bay Area, so that you can support yourself and your family. That's something you should do, and it will not make or break your company whether you took $50,000 or $150,000. That $100,000 will not be the difference if you're successful.
Hi, I'm in the family check as well.
Yes.
Thank you for supporting Calro last year when we were launching on Product Hunt.
Yes.
I loved your upvotes and your comments. And so I am in, it sounds like where you were a year ago, minus the cancerous husband. I'm in that trough of despair, right? Where I get those loving comments every once in a while, and people yell at me when something goes wrong, which means I'm not irrelevant anymore, right? They really care, but we're still struggling with retention, right? So you mentioned some of the hacks that you use to get the organic growth going, but any specific hacks that you use to get retention, fixing that?
So the email and push notifications were huge for retention, because getting back in front of people, reminding them that you exist, is critical, especially with parents. And I think the requirement for that is that you have registered users of your product, and the more information about them that you have, the better you're going to be able to be to reach out to them. So we ask our users the age of their kids and where they live. This enables us to personalize the experience to them, and this is asked of them when they sign up. They can also, all this information is optional. They can also optionally tell us what they're interested in. So they're a single parent, or they're interested in adoption, or they're interested in, style. And we've found like the more we can personalize that outreach that we do, the better. And on the flip side, like if we send a mom of a 3-year-old like content about how to breastfeed, that is generally not, unless she's having another child, it's a big turnoff, because with parents, it's like once you're out of a certain phase, you really just don't want to think about it anymore.
Any other questions?
Yeah, how does Winnie make money, and have you had any big learnings around revenue generation?
So that is the next phase for us. So we don't make any money. And that is also kind of why we had to raise money and not bootstrap. It also is a thing that made it really hard to raise money, since that has seriously fallen out of favor. So if you have a product and you have a way to make money from the start, do that. That was like, I still don't think there was a way to build what we built and make money at the same time. Like we had to take that risk of like, we were gonna wait until we got enough scale to make money. But there's a lot of businesses where you can make money from day one. or you can give it away for free, and like the difference is not going to change your growth. So like make money from day one if you can. VCs really like that. So yeah, now we have this large audience of parents that are coming to Winnie to find daycares, and they're finding them. We're sending a lot of leads to daycares and preschools, to kids' activities, to car seat manufacturers, because they're coming to us and they're asking what car seat to buy, and then they go to Amazon and buy it. And we're not a part of any of those transactions today, but we think there's a huge opportunity, and now at our scale, it starts to become interesting to actually make money off the leads that we're driving. So we're now starting to test some ways to generate revenue, which is exciting. Go ahead.
Yeah, did you have a story about how you're going to make money when you're actually raising funds?
Yeah, yes. But it's, there are some investors that don't care, but I'd say the vast majority were very interested in how we would make money, and also interested in seeing data around that, which we didn't test anything. We don't have anything yet. And so that made it a harder pitch.
Maybe a last question to wrap up.
Hi, thank you for coming out. I think your journey is very encouraging, especially to a lot of female founders out here. So I think one question for both of you. So as a female founder, traditionally, a lot of VCs or angels will view you as high risk or higher risk per se, especially when you are coming as a parent and as a founder. So from the investor side of you, like what's your advice to female founders that are facing a similar situation when they're trying to pitch to an investor, when they can question about the commitment or work-life balance? And as a founder that went through the journey, what's your advice to them in telling the story to the VCs and angels to show them that your commitment and allowing them to see that you'll be able to take the company and grow?
That's right.
Yeah, so I think first of all, when people, and there's been like studies on this, when they look at women, they just like assume that you're gonna like have babies and be unavailable and all these stereotypes. So it actually doesn't matter if you show up pregnant or you're just a woman who is never planning to have kids, because you will be faced with the same stigma and stereotypes. You're penalized for it. So first thing is like, don't worry if you have a family, because even if you don't, you're already being penalized. Even if you go in there and you're like, my tubes are tied, it's never gonna happen, they still won't believe you, and they will associate you with having a family. And they won't do that for men, which is the amazing thing. And this is like, there's been all kinds of studies on this kind of bias. So my solution to that was like, it is a numbers game, and like, if I were a man, I probably wouldn't have had to talk to this many people. But like, there's a lot of advantages I have, and a lot of things that make what I'm working on really exciting. And eventually, I will find someone who believes in that. I also like personally, when I have a lot of money and I'm an investor, I'm only going to invest in women and underrepresented minorities. Because to even get to the point of being able to fundraise is like such a massive hurdle that you have self-selected into being amazing. And so like just that alone is like, you're probably so much better than anyone else. Also, like, it's going to be harder for you to raise money. And so you're not going to like take ridiculous amounts of money. You're going to build a strong business, and you're going to like learn to monetize that business and make a profit as soon as you can, because that's your best chance of survival. And so like as a VC, like those would be the companies that I'd want to invest in, like good businesses, and not people that are just great at taking in millions of dollars and then blowing up. So I think VCs that aren't investing in women and underrepresented minorities are like missing out on a huge opportunity. But fortunately, a lot of people are now seeing that and understanding that, and there's a whole conversation around that now, which is exciting and makes me hope that, when my daughters go out and raise money in a few years, they'll have more success.
I would say being an entrepreneur is really hard. It is a hard journey in so many different ways. And so I think what you want to look for, it is the ultimate underdog story. The odds are always stacked against you. What you want to look for in an investor, I think, is a partner and someone that's going to show up for you and root for you and cheerlead for you and be there for the tough conversations through. Also, treat you with respect, help bring other people to the table, champion what you're building, amplify that. And I think there are a couple ways to try to figure out who will those people be, who respect me and want to champion me and are super excited about the business I'm building. So some ways to try to get at that, look at the existing portfolios of investors to see, do they care about this space? Have they backed diverse networks of people? Get other back channel from other founders who have worked with people to figure out who cares about this space, who's genuinely helpful with hiring or navigating different strategic transitions in the life of the company, and ask other folks who may have come to the table not matching every pattern that many of the folks on the other side of the table have seen throughout most of their career. Because I think there's a pretty great network of people, whether it's communities of founders like all of you who are here today, or networks of people in the industry, that I think you can get that extra bit of information to try to best set you up to match with someone who's going to really support you and support your journey. I think that's a wrap. Sarah and I will both be hanging around if other folks want to chat one-on-one, but thank you all for joining.